Hello, everyone. This is Richard Kazami from the Old Astoria Neighborhood Association, and we're glad that you could join us this evening. We have a wonderful program today. It's going to be initial presentation will be from the Department of Sanitation. It will be a discussion on composting, which is being resurrected after taking the winter off. And then we're going to have a great presentation from the Department of Design and Construction and the Queens Library System, excuse me, on the new library renovations of the Astoria Library on Astoria Boulevard in Old Astoria. And lastly, we're going to have a presentation with Senator Michael Gianaris and with Don Shroup from UCLA Planning and Zhan from NYU Planning, discussion on the possibility of permitted residential parking spaces and whether, in fact, that's a good idea. So I'd like to start off with a few announcements. First of all, the New York City Ferry is partnering with the Old Astoria Neighborhood Association to do a neighborhood cleanup. That will be on the 18th at 5 o'clock, 18th of this month. And it's going to be at the meeting at the landing for the Astoria Ferry. There will be a link in chat now. We'd love to have everybody join us. We're looking forward to a great turnout. We would ask that you RSVP because we want to have an idea of how many supplies we need to get. But this will be the first of what we hope will be many cleanups in the neighborhood. We can all do our part to keep the Astoria waterfront the wonderful area that it is. Then sanitation, they will be presenting later, but there is a list of safe disposal events coming up. This is where you can dispose of items like electronic scrap or hazardous materials, things that you have around the house that you need to get rid of. Again, that link for these dates will be in the chat. Next, I'd like to discuss something that came up. The Port Authority of New York released its version of the air train, which was originally going to come from Willets Point to LaGuardia Airport. They've decided instead to create bus systems from the end of the N line at Ditmars, a shuttle up to the airport. And then they're going to be running another bus from Jackson Heights to the airport. So it's been getting quite a bit of activity online. We've got many, many hundreds of comments and things. Again, we'd like you to check out the op-ed that we put out. The link will be online for this also. One of our major concepts is while we understand that financially it's difficult to put together the type of train system that we're talking about, we still think it's something that needs to be done in the long run. From a regional concept, we'd like to see the hub be at Jamaica, where it can intersect with 5 different subway lines, plus the Long Island Railroad, and that should make both JFK and LaGuardia easily accessible to everybody in the region. It's not just about Queens, it's about the whole region. So we'd like you to check it out, and if you find it interesting, we'd love to hear your comments also. And lastly, we also have another link going up on traffic controls for bike lanes. We think this is extremely important. Our opinion is that we feel that no bike lane should be constructed without traffic controls, and every bike lane that's out there now that does not have them should have them. We find that in Manhattan, where we do see some of these traffic controls, they are generally observed, and it makes it much safer. Whether you drive a car or a bike, it's very difficult to safely ride or drive if you don't have a good idea if somebody else is coming on your right-hand side, you don't see them. This is just a recipe for disaster. So I think a lot of the issues we've been having with bike lanes and bicycle riders can be addressed if we put in those traffic controls. So those are some of the issues that we've been working on over the last month or two, and we'd love to see your opinions if you check out the links. Okay, I'd like to bring up now from the Department of Sanitation, Hillary Bosch. Hillary is an outreach coordinator for the DSNY's Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability. She works primarily on curbside composting, as well as on outreach around smart composting bins, food scrap drop-off sites, and other sanitation initiatives. She's also an instructor for the Master Composter Certificate course. So Hillary, if you'd like to join us, I'd like to hear a refresher course on composting.
Hi, Richard. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone, and thanks again for that wonderful introduction. I'm sure you're all very familiar with composting at this point because Astoria has both curbside composting and it had the first set of smart bins that went out, which is really exciting. And they were so successful in Astoria that that's the service we decided to expand with across the city. So I'm going to go ahead and start presenting and share my screen. This shouldn't take too long, and I definitely want to leave time for questions if we have those. All right. Everyone see this okay? Let's see. Yep, I think so. All right, great. So like I said, I'm Hillary. There's my email as well. I'll provide that in the chat in case you have any follow-up questions or things you... Sure.
Yeah, may I interject? I forgot to tell people that if they have questions, just type them in the chat in YouTube or Facebook, and we will see those questions and we'll be able to ask people. Thank you. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks. All right. So to recap, again, what you already know, this is both to fill in any gaps that you might have and also to help better inform you to tell your neighbors, both in Astoria and in Queens. Curbside composting is back after a winter pause. It's never going away again, fingers crossed. But definitely not seasonally. It is back to stay for all residential buildings in Queens, regardless of size, any single family home or apartment building. We are accepting all food scraps, food soiled paper, and yard waste. And at this time, participation is not required. There is a bill in the city council about curbside composting that you might hear about, but as of right now, participation is entirely voluntary. It came back up. And there's no impact on your regular trash and recycling collection. Our new collection day for Queens, and then the model that, again, works so well in Queens that we're going to expand to the rest of the city, is having compost collection on your recycling day. So whatever your recycling day is, you can put out your compost. And I'll talk a little bit more about the kind of container you should set that out in a minute. So why bother composting? There are plenty of reasons you should compost. Both locally and globally. Depending on what you're looking for, depending on what benefits you're looking for, there's something here for everyone. Globally, it cuts down on methane emissions from landfills. It reduces waste to landfills, and also locally creates a resource out of what would normally be waste. Food waste and compostable material comprise a third of the New York residential waste stream, with recycling being another third. That's normal paper, glass, metal, plastic. And then only a very, very small fraction after electronics and textiles and other divertible materials is actually trash. So we do not see compost as trash. We want it, and we want to use it both as a resource to make valuable soil additive, and then also to make this renewable energy. Down in this lower right-hand corner is the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment facility. That's where most of the Queens collected compost goes, where it's anaerobically digested and converted into a biogas that then we can connect to the grid and use as energy. And then locally, if the climate argument or the landfill argument doesn't sell, that neighbor that you're trying to convince to compost, the local rat benefits are undeniable. Containerizing this food waste is critical in this larger fight against pests in our neighborhoods. So I strongly suggest, if you're not already using a brown bin or any other kind of lidded container for your food waste, and you're still throwing them in a black plastic trash bag, I strongly suggest you make that switch over, because it reduces the chance of rats breaking in, reduces litter on the street, and all those good things. I haven't heard of rats ripping through the brown bins. I have heard of coyotes ripping through them, but that's only in Riverdale, and I hope that there are no coyotes in Astoria. All right, so what can you compost? This has been a little confusing over the years. I just wanted to go over it. If you went to a food scrap drop-off site, it might have looked different, but since this is industrial scale composting, we can take all kinds of stuff that wasn't previously accepted, such as meat, bones, dairy, any kind of food, no matter how old it is, no matter how hard it is, any kind of food, soiled paper, coffee grounds, coffee filters, even oily pizza boxes, we can take those as well, and then any kind of yard waste that you might have. The only kind of organic matter that we will not accept is any kind of hygiene products or pet waste, just because we use this material either as compost or, like I said, as energy, and we just really don't want to bring any kind of unnecessary pathogens into that process. All right, so what should you put out? How should you put it out? In the fall, you probably got a flyer or a mailer to request one of these brown bins for your building. That was kind of a one-time, like, get a brown bin if you need it. A lot of people already had them. But unlike other versions of the program, you can use now any normal trash can, any normal trash bin, so long as it's under 55 gallons, which is pretty big, has a lid, because again, we want to mitigate against those rats, and then has a composting sticker on it, just so our sanitation workers know what to look for and they don't, accidentally throw the wrong thing in the wrong truck. So if you don't have a brown bin, that's okay. You can still compost. Just slap one of these stickers on a normal trash can with a lid. You can order them for free for delivery at that website right there, nyc.gov/composting bin decal. We'll deliver it right to your house. You can order a couple if you need a couple bins. We're happy to take care of that. And then again, you probably heard about the new set out rules. If you're using a bin, which you absolutely should be for your food waste, place those bins out after 6 p.m. Leaf and yard waste, since the critters don't really want your sticks and leaves as much as they want your pizza crusts and eggshells, it's okay if these go in a paper lawn and leaf bag, or the brown bin. If you have room in there, of course you can put them in your brown bin or your 55-gallon bin, but it's also okay to put this kind of material in a paper lawn and leaf bag or a clear plastic bag. And then again, the new set out rules for bags is 8 p.m. or later. Where does it go? This is a map of what we were talking about if it's anaerobically digested or composted. And here you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but where Astoria is, it's going to that Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant, where it's digested, mixed with the wastewater, and then processed and converted into a renewable energy. All right, so for your building, things that you need, if you want flyers, if you want decals, like I said, more stickers, if you want like a how-to compost guide or things to provide either for your neighbors or for your super, nyc.gov/sanitation materials is the way to go. We also have a really great team of outreach associates that we work with through Big Reuse that are more than happy to come to your building, and maybe if your co-op board needs some convincing or your neighbors need some help, we can give away free kitchen containers. We can do a quick presentation, do a Q&A. Absolutely happy to come to your building and do whatever's needed to get everyone on board. So if you go to that link, the on.nyc.gov/event request, submit that, or you can email me directly. We'll get someone out to your building. The last setup, if you're using a bin, brown bin, or your own bin for your food waste, I strongly suggest that you line the bin with a clear plastic recycling bag. Do not use a black plastic trash bag, because our sanitation workers might get confused if it's not in a labeled bin, it's got a black plastic bag inside the bin. So use a clear plastic liner, or else that bin might get a little grungy, especially as we go into the summer with food waste in there. Additionally, write your address on your bin. Everybody's composting now, and if a sanitation worker might carry it a little down the street, you want to make sure it gets back to you. And then in terms of where to put the bin, this is one of the biggest concerns we get, especially for large recycling buildings, residential buildings. You can either put it in your trash room, or you can put your bins neatly within 3 feet of your property line. So you're more than welcome to store them outside. Just keep that lid on, because again, we don't want the critters.
Thank you. This has been a great program. I know in my neighborhood, it's a lot of people are utilizing it, and they're looking forward to getting started again. I did have a couple of questions here.
I'm just gonna jump to that There we go.
Are you done with the presentation now, or do you have more to do?
Just the very last thing, that's kind of the how-to.
Okay, go ahead.
If you have more stuff, then maybe you're willing to wait for a once-a-week collection. Keep using those smart bins. You can find the locations of the smart bins in the NYC Compost app. And then also, if you're doing some gardening this spring, go to nyc.gov/getcompost. You might have gotten a flyer about this as well. We're giving away up to 2 40-pound bags of compost to every Queens resident that wants it. So definitely check that out and try to jump in and get a time slot before they're all filled up. And yep, that's it. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry for interrupting. So,
No.
yeah, a couple of questions. One, you actually already answered it. In our neighborhood, we have a lot of dogs all over the place. And actually, we've considered and talked to sanitation in the past about putting up dispensers for bags for dogs, dog waste, particularly since there's not as many plastic bags out there nowadays like before.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that was brought up was, is there a possibility of creating, using the waste for compost? Now, you're telling me you don't want to mix it with the normal compost, but is there a situation you could see where this could be actually collected separately in these areas where there's a lot of dogs, particularly around Astoria Park, along our waterfront? And it is an issue because we got a lot of waste on the street and things like that. So
Sure.
if it's not possible, go back to your people and see what can be done.
Thanks for bringing that up. I was talking to some folks in Jackson Heights, and they had the same concern. They were like, what can we do about this? It's just like such a menace to the community. And I definitely see that personally. Right now, I don't know of any sanitation funded initiatives to compost pet waste. I know Battery Park City is trying to do their own program where they're composting pet waste to see how it goes. But at this time, there's no active projects, but it doesn't mean that wouldn't happen in the future.
Good. This might be something that we might try and help initiate. If you could let us know who the people are in Battery Park City, I'd love to connect with them.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to get in touch.
Thanks. Good. I guess, and the other question is, why did you actually take the hiatus for the winter? And is this something that's going to happen every year?
Sure. Good question. It was a one-time thing. It was only this past winter. It will not happen again in Queens, or when we roll out to Brooklyn in October, or when we roll out to the Bronx and Staten Island in next March, or in Manhattan next October in 2024. My understanding of why we took the pause is this new version of the program that we rolled out in Queens was different than other versions that we've rolled out. For example, the opt-in program where you had to sign up to get service, or even the version before COVID, which looked a lot like this one, because we changed the routes and we changed the trucks that we were using. And so I think we wanted to gauge if it worked in those first couple months before we spent even more money during the winter. Especially the winter is very busy for us because it's snow season, and that's really where our priority is. So I think there was some concern, starting this new program during snow season, or going through with this new program through snow season. So we're really mindful of that, but it was a great success, and we know that we don't need to do that going forward.
Good. Okay. All right. Well, those are my questions. So thank you so much for the presentation. Okay.
Sure.
You touched a lot of great subjects, and we look forward to the program expanding more and more. And we look to I'd just like to have enough dirt on my property in order to use the composting, maybe someday.
Maybe someday. I know I don't need 40 pounds of compost. I'm in an apartment, maybe a 1 pound bag, But yeah, definitely call me up or let me know if anyone on the call needs composting help or needs help convincing your neighbors or your super or whoever. But we'll be coming by every recycling day, pick up whatever's there.
By the way, you may have answered this. Are you still giving the in-apartment little containers? Are they still?
Yes. Yeah. The kitchen containers. Yep, we got 20,000 of them, and we are more than happy to give them out to anyone who will use it and compost.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great help too.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much, Hillary. And we'll see you soon. Thank you. Okay, that was great. Okay, our next program is involved with the Queens Library and our branch here on 14th Street and Astoria Boulevard. It's one of the original Carnegie libraries. It's a very old facility. And for years, we've been discussing renovations. It looks like they're about to happen. So I'd like to bring up the Queens Library, plus also the Department of Design and Construction, who's going to be directly handling the renovations. First of all, we have Luisa Benedetto, the Assistant Director of Government Affairs for Queens Public Library. Okay, and we also should bring up Dawood. Zia, how are you? Zia is Director of Capital Projects at the Queens Public Library, and it has 66 locations throughout the borough, including branch libraries, the central libraries, 7 adult learner centers, and a technology center. And then we also have the Department of Design and Control. We have Anna Killion and also Anthony Romeo. Anna, if you want to introduce Anthony and yourself.
Yes, I will. Good evening. My name is Anna Killion. I work for the New York City Department of Design and Construction, Office of Outreach, Communication and Notification. My colleague on the meeting is DDC Anthony Romeo, Program Director of Queens Library for Public Buildings. Anthony, would you like to share your screen and start the presentation?
I hope it works.
Okay. If not, I'll try to share mine.
Is it working?
I don't see it yet. How about I try to share my screen? Is that okay? And then I could just walk you through the slides.
Do you see it?
I don't see your screen.
It's so frustrating.
We actually also have another copy of it that we can do from the host if it ends up being an issue.
I think it's
I'm
becoming an
having
issue.
trouble sharing the screen. It says I'm sharing.
Okay, maybe we could just try sharing it.
Well, why don't you work on, oh, here we go. Very good. Okay, beautiful.
Okay. Anthony, you can start the presentation.
Yes, why don't
Okay.
we start with discussions of the
Then we,
renovations, and after that we can go to a discussion with the library itself and operations and what's going on.
Okay, so
Okay.
I'll go to the next slide then so Anthony can start.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you.
All right, great. So it's good to be back on your program, Richard. It's been 2 years.
Yep.
I was last year. And I'm hearing myself echo. Can you? I don't know why that's happening.
Do you have a phone on or something else?
No. So
Do you have headphones?
2 years ago, I thought we would be completed with our construction documents around this time of 2023, and that's exactly what has occurred. We're still on budget. We're still on projected construction start of summer of next year. And this is in spite of the fact that we had some challenges with the structure. What is exactly going on here?
Oh, we can hear you pretty well. I don't, is anybody else having any
Something
issues?
strange. I see. I don't even know what's going on. I see.
So
I don't-
Anthony, I'm sharing my screen and just
Okay,
let me
Mira,
know.
I'm good. Okay. Something else popped up. I'm sorry for the difficulty. When you're marrying a new building to an existing building, all sorts of things can occur. And during the course of the design in the last year, the architects and our DDC engineers discovered that the building, the existing building, had a higher foundation than the new building, the new addition. And so a careful engineering had to take place to underpin the existing building. And that took some time and a great deal of ingenuity. And our architect or consultant, Yoshiara McKee, and our architectural engineering department, our structural engineers, worked very closely together to come up with solutions to make sure that nothing occurred to the existing Carnegie building while we made the new addition and new elevator in the building. And like I said, in spite of all of that, we're still on schedule and perhaps even a little bit ahead of schedule to start construction. The drawings are complete and they are now in the hands of our A&E department to review. And once that's completed, then we'll go out to bid and we'll be able to select a contractor and start construction. And it's very exciting we got to this point. So to review the scope of work, the first level of the building is going to include a new adult and teen reading area, staff work areas, a new entrance, which will be ADA or Americans with Disability Act accessible, a new elevator to provide easy access to all the floors in the building. The mezzanine level will have an adult learning center. The lower level, there'll be a children's reading room, a multi-purpose room, and again, new accessible restrooms. Throughout the building, complete gut renovation will include full ADA accessibility, ADA restrooms, a new elevator, as I said, new furniture, new flooring and finishes, new lighting, and state-of-the-art computers, new material handling systems, new windows, new heating and air conditioning. Essentially, it's going to be a new building. And this is the old 1904 Carnegie building that Richard mentioned earlier. As you can see, it has a Flemish revival style with a corner entry, and those are the original steps going up to the entry and only the ground floor. But then later, they expanded the building with those steps that we now are familiar with, and we lost the historic Flemish design except for the roof profile. Everything about this existing building was not ADA compliant in terms of accessibility. The new building will change all of that, and as you can see here, as I said before, on the first floor will have an ADA compliant ramp at the front, restrooms, a new elevator, new adult reading room, new teen and cyber center, and every floor will be very well lit in terms of natural light and artificial lighting. A new children's reading room and a multi-purpose room on the lower level. And this is a very important part, and which the Astoria Library is one of the unique libraries in the city of New York to have this aspect. The Works Progress Administration, WPA, there are two historic murals in the building that will be carefully with an professional art conservator will be responsible for handling all aspects of the deinstallation, conservation, storage, and reinstallation of these two murals by Max Spivak, completed during the Works Progress Administration Federal Art Program project for the children's room of the library. And the paintings include, and you can Google their history, grand finale of an opera scene and acrobats, which depict whimsical circus and opera puppets. They're really wonderful murals, and I feel Queens is very lucky to have them. And I think that it's very glad they're going to be a very important part of this renovation. This is the architect's concept drawing of the adult reading room, and you can see the murals on the left, on the right. And this is the entry of the new building. Again, very well lit with natural lighting. So you can, this is contact information for Anna and our Director of Community Outreach, Norberto Acevedo. And that's it. We're looking forward to getting into construction. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful new library, a new addition to Astoria.
Good. Thank you. I have a couple quick questions on this subject. First of all, could you tell me who contributed to the budget, where the funding is coming from?
So, Anthony, would you like me to field that?
Yes, Luisa, I would.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Again, it's Luisa Benedetto. I'm the Assistant Director of Government Affairs for the library. So our former council member, really, Costa Constantinidis, contributed a good portion of the funding. We are very thankful to him, our current council member, Tiffany Caban, and to Borough President Richards for supporting this project and getting it through this, the last bit until we can begin construction.
Good, thank you. Also, and you might have answered this, I might have missed it, but what kind of facilities do you have in there for conferences, meetings? Is there?
There'll be a very nice new meeting room, for public access in the building.
Good. Okay.
And I'd just like to add, we also have a classroom type room that's located on the mezzanine level that can also be used for smaller gatherings.
And all new state-of-the-art audio, video systems in the library as well.
Good. Okay. Another question might be, I'd like to know, can you give me an idea of whether they have any beacon or after-school programs in the facility now? This is going to be particularly important. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, that coming up this summer, the Astoria pool will be closed, which is a heavily used facility for our youth. And, as much as we can offer alternatives to kids, particularly in this library, this is separate from this renovation, but we'd love to see whatever you can do to be done, for after school and for summertime programs.
I can only imagine the gap that will be in the community once the pool closes. Queens Public Library, a top priority for us is to prevent the summer slide. So when kids are out of school in the summer, we want to prevent their knowledge drain, right? So we spend a lot of time doing summer reading activities over the summer so we can prevent kids from any learning loss during those summer months. In regards to after school programming, I will have to get back to you on that. But, one of the great things about Astoria Library and of course, all the libraries throughout the system is even if we don't have, let's say, scheduled set programming for after school, it kind of naturally occurs, right? And the staff at the library are always there to help the kids, no matter the age after school within our libraries to help them out. But I will get back to you with an official response about that.
Okay, thank you. One last question, and this is for Luisa, this is for you. There are rumblings that the budget is going to be cut significantly for libraries throughout the New York City area. And I know that, as a matter of fact, the senator is in the middle of budget negotiations, so is the city. This is an important time. Is there anything that you would like to say or comment about the value of libraries for our standard of living here in Queens?
Yeah, Richard, thanks for bringing that up. I mean, I think the library is the center of the community, really, and that's the local institution where people no matter their background, race, economic level, whatever it may be, they can go to their local library and know they're going to receive the services they need, whether it's going just on the computer to check their email, to access our Wi-Fi, get a book, a movie, whatever it may be. They can come to us and they're going to get that service. Yes, we are currently facing cuts in the upcoming budget. So there's 3 library systems: Queens Public Library, yours truly, Brooklyn Public Library, and New York Public Library. So we're the 3 library systems for New York City. And combined, our total cut for fiscal year 24, proposed cut, is $52.7 million. For Queens Public Library alone, that's $15 million. That's a big number for us. It's hard to sustain. There will be service impacts, whether it's collections, programming, hours. We're still assessing what shape it will take. But we're very fortunate. We have a Queens delegation, council delegation, that's very passionate about libraries, especially Queens Public Library. So we count on, their support. And if anyone wants to write a letter of support for libraries, you could go to queenslibrary.org and you could click on the link and send a letter to our city officials to urge them to protect us in the upcoming budget.
Good. Well, I truly hope it happens. In other years, I've heard this same tale. Usually we recover most of the money. Let's hope that this year is the same. They're, as you said, too important to the community. In particular, like I said, I couldn't imagine what this community would be like without that library branch. It's bad enough that the library on 31st Street, I think it is being renovated right now. So we have one down right now, but you will not be going down before this one comes back up, I'm assuming, correct? Good. There was a question here in the chat from Inga. It says, I might have missed it. What was the timeline for the project, proposed beginning and completion dates? If you could reiterate that, that would be great.
The construction is going to begin next summer, and it should be completed by the, summer of 24, the fall of 26.
Sorry, Richard, I will just add that that's when DDC construction will be finished. So there is another component. That's when DDC is estimated to hand it back to QPL. And then we take approximately 4 months or so to outfit the library. So you have new technology, updated collections and whatnot. So we do that before we open to the public.
And you might have already mentioned this. Maybe I missed it. In the interim, will there be a bookmobile? Will there be another facility? Exactly how will you handle that during the timeline?
Yeah, for projects like this, we do a mobile library service. And of course, when we get closer to that construction start, we'll have more details about that.
And what is usually available on these mobile buses?
It's kind of like a mini library. You can get books on there. I'm looking, you can't see me, but I'm looking to Zia if he has anything to add. You can request books. I think people can pick them up there. What else, Zia?
Right. You have Wi-Fi access, and I believe there's 1 or 2 computer stations that can be utilized within the mobile library. And then, of course, you have the librarian at hand to interface with as needed.
Good. All right. Let's see. Okay, great. Well, that's great. We really appreciate your presentations. We're looking forward to this. It's been a long road. I think this first came up on our radar. It must be 4 or 5 years ago when it was first started to be discussed, primarily because of accessibility. And we really look forward to being up and running, and you're saying 2024 or 2026, right? Excuse me.
Yes.
Is when you should be done. Okay, good. Well, we'll have another meeting before then, a progress meeting in a couple of years, and then we're going to have that party when you're up and running. How's that? Okay,
Can't
thank
wait.
you guys. Yep, thank you guys so much for.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Good. Okay, great. Now, we have an interesting topic coming up. This is something that the Old Astoria Neighborhood Association has discussed in the past. We actually, I think in 2018, we put proposals forth. This is for residential parking permits for the neighborhood. And I know this is a somewhat controversial subject, but we thought it important that we have a presentation now when we can give some of the facts and give some of the options so that people understand what's actually being proposed here. We have actually come up with a position ourselves, and I'll briefly let you know what we've come up with. First of all, parking permits, what they are is permits to allow yourself to park within a certain geographic area or neighborhood, okay? And if you don't have a permit, you can't park there. And usually this is at night, and not all of the parking spots are affected. It's based upon actually what's needed in the neighborhood. We are against it at this point only because we want to wait until congestion pricing, if and when it goes through, that might cause issues in the neighborhood. We're worried that people coming from outside the city or the outer boroughs, even more outer than we are, would take their cars and park near public transportation to avoid the congestion pricing charge when they're heading into Manhattan. We don't think it would be fair for the residents here to lose their parking to what I would call carpetbaggers. But I think it's important before we start a program like this that we make sure that it's needed. There is a bill being put through by our Senator Michael Gianaris, who will be joining us in a second. And we're entirely in favor of this bill because from what we understand, the main point of this bill is to take the authority to create these zones from the state and let the city create these parking zones. I think it's much better. Number one, we feel it's not appropriate for a senator from upstate New York or Western New York to vote on something that's needed here that affects our quality of life. Also, I think that there's one less bureaucratic hurdle to go over. If we don't have to go through the state approval now, it can be done much quicker if and when it is needed. So that's a brief overview of where we're at. I'd like to invite to the stage our Senator Michael Gianaris and Donald Shroup, professor at UCLA in planning.
Can you hear me, Richard?
Yes, I do.
All right, great, terrific. I'm calling in from my car because, as you probably know, the budget's not done yet. So,
are you in Albany now or here?
I'm now just about home, but I pulled over to take this call. I didn't want to miss it because I know I committed to talking to you about this, and so I'm just about back in Astoria at this point. But I appreciate your comments, and the important thing about this to remember is what you just said, is we're not trying to force anyone to do anything. We hear a lot, and as obviously, I represent Queens a long time, that Albany tells the city what to do and dictates down to the city's rules and regulations, and we're trying to do the opposite here. So all that we have proposed is giving authorization to the city to do this if they want to do it. They don't even have to do it if they don't want to do it, but they would need the okay from state government if they wanted to pursue it. And so we suggested, let's give them that okay. They could decide when they want to do it, where they want to do it, how they want to do it. And that would involve interfacing with the communities and with groups like yours to determine where residents would benefit from it and where they wouldn't, how much they should charge, what hours of the day it should be. All of those details should be driven by the community, which I think was your point, and I completely agree with. But that being said, as we sit here today, if the city wanted to do it, they couldn't because the state has to tell them they can. And so we wanted to at least get that hurdle out of the way and let them do it. Not only because congestion pricing is coming, and you're right, we're expecting a lot of disruption once that happens, but also because we're in a moment in time when the MTA is only at 60% of its pre-pandemic ridership, and they have a huge budget hole of about $1.5 billion every year that they need to fill. So we thought whatever the city wants to charge for these permits can go to the MTA, help fill that hole, and try and solve two problems at once here. And so it's been suggested. There was actually some members from the city council, not from Queens, but from Brooklyn and some other parts, who came out against this was very strange to me. They came out against the idea that they should have the power to do this. They didn't want, they usually complain about us telling them what to do. In this case, we're giving them the power to do what they want, and they didn't want to do that either. So I'm not sure where this is going to land. We tried to make it part of the budget process, which is not done yet. And even if it's not done there, we may just try and do it legislatively to at least give the city this power. But it's still up in the air right now. Got a lot of attention when we suggested it, and we're trying to get support from the assembly and from the governor so we can at least get this part of the process done.
I'd like to bring Donald Shroup. Is he still backstage? Can we bring him up? Ah, there he is. Yes, good. Or, maybe. Well, anyway, listen. While we're waiting for Donald, yeah, I totally agree with you. One thing I'd like to, I want to ask you one other question. This is off the topic of this subject, but it's really very disturbing, and it has to do with the recent death of two young people due to fires from the batteries, lithium batteries. This has been going on for quite a while now, and I just don't understand why there's no legislation, there's no regulation going on here. I mean, this is intolerable as far as I'm concerned. This should not be happening. I can't think of something in the middle of Ramadan for that family from Yemen to lose two of their children is just it's beyond the pale.
It's so
are
awful.
you guys doing anything? Yeah.
Yeah, it's so awful, and I'll be brief because I see Donald has made it on now, so I want to get back to the topic. But Senator Liz Kruger from Manhattan, has a bill to regulate the lithium batteries associated with the e-bikes, and unfortunately, it hasn't passed yet. So, because of incidents like this, I think it's going to drive that solution. Hopefully, we can get it done quickly. But it's definitely being proposed, and we're on it. It's just been too slow.
Okay, hopefully. So I have Donald Shroup here. Donald is a distinguished research professor in the Department of Urban Planning at the University of California, Los Angeles. His research is focused on how parking affects cities, the economy, and the environment. So Donald, did you hear the statement from the senator?
Well, thanks very much for inviting me. I haven't lived in New York since 1965, so I can't really say that I'm an expert, but I have studied parking in a lot of other cities, and I've spoken to Manhattan many times. I really like the senator's bill. I think these parking permit districts, which are all around the world, they're everywhere except New York. I think they work well enough. Enough curb spaces for all of
Donald, excuse me, sorry, we're having a problem hearing you. Talisha, is there anything that we can do to try and make the sound better? Is it the connection, the internet connection?
You can't hear me?
Now you're better. Okay, good.
Okay, well, yes, I say that parking permit districts do well in neighborhoods where there are enough curb spaces for all the residents. So every resident who's entitled to a permit can have a curb space. But they don't work well in blocks and neighborhoods where there are many more residents than curb spaces. Say in the Upper West Side, there are 18 residents for every curb space. So it's hard to think of how a conventional permit district would work there, especially at a price of $30 a month, which is $1 a day. I think there are a lot of people who would like to have curb parking space for $1 a day and parking in some of the most expensive land on earth. So I think it would be very difficult for a permit district to work there because there would be a very few lucky drivers who get a permit and everybody else would be on a waiting list. And there wouldn't be much space, curb space for service workers or visitors or anybody else. So I think that we have to have a different policy that for these very dense neighborhoods, and they're working very well in other cities. That if we give permits to everybody who wants one in the Upper West Side, the permits would just be hunting licenses, and people wouldn't see any benefit from that. But if you limit the number of permits to the number of curb spaces, the question is who gets it. If there are 18 people who are entitled to it, who gets the one permit? So what some cities do to avoid this problem is they establish what are called parking benefit districts that charge market rate prices to balance supply and demand, the way we do in all other markets. And then the districts spend all the revenue to pay for added services on the metered blocks. So the people who, say in the Upper West Side, where there are 18 people per curb space, one person would end up paying for curb parking, and 18 people would benefit from the added public services. So because the demand varies by time of day, you'd have to have different prices at different time of day and different locations.
Is that something like the senator mentioned the fact that he wants the funding to go to help the NTA? And in fact, you're mentioning that to keep the funding within the neighborhood.
Yes, but in a special way, that the money would go to pay for for free public transit passes for everybody who lives in the neighborhood. The Upper West Side, the curb parking permits would pay much more than enough to give a free transit pass to everybody on the Upper West Side. So if you think that the permit districts are established in New York the way they are everywhere else, you only get a permit district if a majority of the residents petition to have it. So there's no parking benefit district without a petition signed by more than half of the residents. So it's an opt-in process. It's block by block, and it's democratic. So I think if in a dense neighborhood, if you ask people, which would you rather have, free curb parking permits or free public transit? And I think in the Upper West Side, when we're only a small percentage own a car, only 27% of the people on the Upper West Side own a car. And people who do own a car have double the income of people who don't own a car. So I think that if you put it up to a democratic vote through a petition, that many people would say, I would like to have a parking benefit district in this neighborhood, so that the permits, the parking is available to people who are willing to pay the market price, and the revenue pays for free public transit. So all the money goes to the MTA. All of the money goes to the MTA to buy passes, and it will increase transit ridership as well. It's very different from simply giving the money to the MTA. It's going to residents.
You're seeing a benefit. You're seeing a benefit for the neighbors, for the neighborhood. In other words, you're saying give free transit passes to the people in the neighborhood where the parking spots are being held, and keep it there so the funding will still go to the MTA. However, people will not view the funding as going into a black hole in the budget of a city agency. It'll actually be helping people in the neighborhood. Any comments on that? That's an interesting idea, Senator.
It is interesting. I mean, one of the reasons why what we envisioned was not having us make that level of granular decision is because we think the community boards, the city council, and city government are better equipped to decide on the governance of something like this. And so we limited our proposal to a very simple one, just saying the city can do this if it chooses to do it, and it could choose to do it any which way it wants to do it. So, I mean, whether you get a majority of people on a particular block of the Upper West Side or not, or whether you dedicate the funding for free transit or just to keep the MTA afloat, those are all things that that we want the city's input on and the city decision-making posture.
Yes, I think that's a wise idea. It ought to be left to New York, but there is a cap on how much the permits can it's $1 a day, essentially $30 a month is $1 a day. So I think if you took out the cap on what the firm could use, and to say that it could be dealt for a more market operation, I think that it's going to help many more poor people than if you think of a parking permit system does nothing for people who are too poor to own a car. But a parking benefit system that finances free transit passes will benefit everybody essentially. And I think that it's different from giving money straight to the MTA, because if you give it through transit passes, it'll increase transit ridership.
Well, you're touching on a related but separate point too. One of the things we're trying to do, and we think we may make some progress on, is limited free transit throughout the system on bus routes to start with. We're looking at 2 free bus routes per borough as a pilot program to see how it works. Does it in fact increase the ridership that we're trying to get back into the system, and so on. We have not married the two issues the way you just did, Donald, but it's an interesting thought of saying whatever you raise can go to fuel additional free transit.
Yeah, normally free transit means that the MTA would be losing revenue. But this way, it's free transit and the MTA would get a lot of revenue. The parking would now finance public transit. But by giving, on the demand side, it increases the demand for public transit. And I think that the advantage of charging these market prices, so you have 1 or 2 open spaces on every block. That's what other cities do. It's right in the legislation. That the staff is responsible for setting prices that will leave 1 or 2 open spaces on every block, so there's no cruising. There was a study, a New York study on the Upper West Side, where they measured how far people drove hunting for parking. And in the 15-block area, the Upper West Side, this cruising generated more than, I think, 360,000 miles per year and 22 tons of CO2 per block. So if you have the right price and the money goes to transit, the city would look like a Hollywood movie of the great life of Manhattan. There's always an open parking space waiting for you when you arrive. It won't be free. At least it won't be free all the time, but it will always be open. So nobody will drive around hunting for parking. I have a quote from the Mark Levine, who's the borough president. He said, anyone who's ever looked for a parking spot in Manhattan knows all too well it's a brutal and time-consuming process. And you've lived with this from the beginning since cars were invented. And I think that if you charge the right price and spent the revenue for transit passes, it would make everybody better off.
Is the $30 cap still in the bill? Because I know initially it was, but I'm not sure if it still is.
No, it was a concept because we were trying to peg a number to suggest how much. The reason it was part of the budget discussion is we were trying to fill the MTA's hole, and we needed to assign a number to this proposal to predict how much it might raise for the city and for the MTA. And so it was more of a guidepost. It wasn't so much intended to be either a floor or a cap, but just a suggestion that the city can deviate from.
Yeah, from our concept, it was, one thing that the comments that I get from the neighborhood is that people really tend to feel that all parking should be free. It's a given right. So, that's what makes this difficult. However, by the same token, the city has been really working strong to try and get people out of cars.
Right.
So, but if you make these parking spots too cheap, what you're going to end up doing, which is what Donald said earlier, was you're going to end up facilitating people to be able to get more cars. So you really,
nobody wants to pay for parking, including me. But if the revenue pays for public services that residents want and will not get unless the city charges for parking, market prices make political sense. I think on many blocks in New York, if you had somebody came around with a petition saying, we want to charge market prices for car parking on this block, and everybody will get a transit pass, I think the democratic outcome will be we want a parking benefit district. And it wouldn't be a permit district. I think Upper West Side, of course, is extreme. But there are other high density blocks in Manhattan. But I think that it'll tend to be for short-term parking because the prices of short-term parking are much higher and will produce more revenue for the MTA. And people who want to store a car, they want to park a car overnight, they can park off-street. They'd have to pay for off-street parking. But having some of the most expensive land on earth being given away for a permit for $1 a day is just so out of whack with everything else we do in the city. I mean, New York is a financial hub of the world, and yet when you step out onto the sidewalk, you find that they don't understand how markets work here.
Although I will say $1 a day is $1 more a day than it's costing anybody now to park on those spots on the streets.
Except that I would say this, that time is money, and that time that you spend cruising the streets, if it's 15, 20 minutes a day, that adds up. Even the minimum wage, what's that? That's like $5 an hour. You add that up, and, that's a lot more than $1 a day. So, I think, and of course, big points about the pollution, the environmental issues, and just the mental issues too, the exasperation. If you can, and the other thing that people don't think about is, what if you found that parking spot at 7 o'clock, and on purpose you do not use your car for 3 days because you don't want to lose a parking spot, even though you need to go shopping somewhere or this or that, you don't move the car. That makes no sense either. So,
that's right. I think the key is to have 1 or 2 open spaces on every block, because when you have cruising, it congests traffic, it pollutes the air, it increases carbon emissions, it endangers cyclists and pedestrians. People even die in New York over fights over curb parking. You see it in a headline. I have a collection of headlines, and many of them are in New York. The more than even one person gets murdered in disputes over these scarce parking spaces. So I think if you had 1 or 2 open spaces, it would be a much more civilized city.
Okay. Listen, Senator, I think that do you have to take off soon? Do you have an appointment you have to go, or can you stay with us? We have one other speaker coming on later, but he's just getting to his computer.
I do need to run, unfortunately, because I'm on the side of a road somewhere. I need to keep moving. Okay. I don't want to take up one of these free parking spots for too long.
Good. Well, listen, here's the last thing I want to say is that even if this does not become part of the budget, I do hope that you continue to pursue this as a standalone bill. I think it's very important. I think it, I don't know what the percentage of the congestion pricing is, if it will eventually go through. I know it's going through a court process now, if I'm not incorrect. But, let's be prepared. Let's think ahead. So even if it is not part of the budget, I'd love to still see this go through. And hopefully this could be a blueprint for some other issues that we think should be handled locally that are going through Albany right now, which just doesn't make sense. So.
And you don't have to wait for congestion pricing. It's a lot easier to charge a parked car than it is to charge a moving car. Mm-hmm. You know how to charge parked cars. The technology is all there. We just have what I felt that the accomplishment is the capability times will. I think it's just the will that is, and the will comes just from sending petitions, saying that any neighborhood can have a petition for this. If you don't want it, you don't have it. But if you do want it, you should. The city should offer it. So I think, Senator, I think you make it very clear that cities can offer this option. There's a lot written about how these work. I mean, it isn't pie in the sky. It's been established for a long time.
Yep, I agree. Like and Richard, thank you for your attention to this, and thank you for letting me join you all tonight.
Yeah, I'd like to bring Zhan on now too. He's from NYU's planning, and he's going to join us in the conversation. Hi, Zhan.
Hello,
you got time to say goodbye to the senator, but unless
hi, Mike.
Hey guys, thank you.
I know
Richard.
you have to go. All right, hi, Don.
Okay,
Good to see you.
Zhan? Yes, thank you for being able to join us. We've been having a conversation. Have you been listening to it at all? Have you had a chance to?
I just got home. Sorry, I was actually delayed by, again, the traffic.
Too bad. Oh, well. But could you explain a little bit about your background? And I know that you're involved in parking and your, outlook on this particular subject.
Yes, so, I'm a faculty member in the Wagner School at NYU. So in primarily transportation policy, urban planning, and I also have done a lot of research on parking, and particularly in New York City, but also in other parts of the world as well, especially in London. I think to some extent we all follow Don's step, right? The food step, right? To investigate parking, to think about how to actually either regulate or deregulate the parking. And I think New York City is a wonderful place, right, to think about the parking. That's the the to-go topic to start the conversation.
Good. Did you have a chance to read the bill or what's being proposed in Albany?
I know the topic of the bill, but I actually didn't look at the detail. And from my perspective, I think residence parking permits actually make a pretty good sense in New York City. With or without congestion pricing, I think that's a pretty standalone policy. I would advocate for city. So New York City is probably the only major city without the residential parking permits. I think probably a lot of people get to know that at this point. So that's something I wanted to make it clear.
Good. If you, Donald, would like to go over briefly some of your points, particularly discussing how you can incorporate the MTA funding into this, and maybe Zhan could comment on that.
Well, yes, I think, I would say Zhan is one of the world experts on parking, and he lives in New York, so he's probably the person to listen to than me. But Zhan, I was talking about the policy of parking benefit districts that are spreading around the country. It's very hard to convince people that we ought to charge for car parking because the money seems to disappear. And the cities that have been successful in creating a desire to charge for car parking dedicate all or a share of the revenue to pay for added public services on the metered blocks. Many of them pay it for clean and safe services, like what a business improvement district would do, to clean the sidewalks and make them safe. Handsome street furniture, historic street lights. Some cities give free Wi-Fi to everybody in the district. If you have parking meters, you get free Wi-Fi in your neighborhood. And in Boulder, Colorado, uses the meter money to give free transit passes to everybody who works downtown. On the metered blocks in downtown, if you have meters, all your employees get free transit. So I think it's probably better that commuters who ride by the bus are paid for by people who park on the street, especially when the people who park on the street usually don't live there. Nobody knows who pays for a parking meter, but it's usually not the resident. So I think Boulder, Colorado is probably better off with parking meters and free transit for commuters than it would be with free parking and everybody having to pay for transit. So this is how I would extend it to Manhattan. Zhan, I was talking about how unusually dense the Upper West Side is. But other parts of Manhattan, Chinatown, the other parts of New York have neighborhoods where there are many more residents than curb parking spaces. And if that's the case, how do you divide it? Who gets it? So I think the way to do it is to set the fair market price for these curb parking spaces. And by the fair market price is what Seattle and San Francisco and LA and some other cities do, is the lowest price the city can charge and still have 1 or 2 open spaces on every block. It's easy to say. It's not always easy to predict, but the only way to find out what the market price is to begin charging for it. If half the spaces are empty, the price is too high. If no spaces are empty, the price is too low. You just look at it. Anybody can look at it and be an expert on parking. You don't have to have a consultant to tell you what the price is. You just have to look at the block as you walk down. You're an expert. If all the spaces are full, the price is too low. That's all there is to it. But then to make that politically popular, the idea is to spend the money to benefit the people who live or work or own property, the stakeholders, that they will get the revenue. And then once they know they're getting the revenue, then market prices make political sense. They can see and say it happens in downtown LA at our Coliseum, where the Olympic events have happened before and will happen again. But it happens in every event at the Coliseum, that around the neighborhoods around the Coliseum, that the residents sell space in their driveways to the people who have tickets at the game. It happens all over the country around in university towns. People make their backyards available for people going to the game, and it makes it easier for people coming to the games and leaving. They don't go into a parking lot, they go to somebody's house and park in the driveway. And when you do that, everybody thinks that we're not a bunch of a nation of freeloaders, that paying for what you use is very American. Some people think that's un-American to charge for parking. I think it's very American to charge people for what they use. And if you can make this market work so that the stakeholders will see a benefit for themselves, they'll very quickly say, I think we ought to charge market prices for curb parking.
One comment I'd like to make first is that Astoria and Western Queens, we have huge issues also. And I know you talk about Manhattan quite a bit, but the people in the outer boroughs, actually have to have more vehicles. Than a bigger percentage of the people here have vehicles than in Manhattan because of the lack of decent public transportation. So, that's why it's an important subject down here. I would say it's probably just as bad here as it is in Manhattan to find parking spots. And the comments you're making about the senator's bill, specifically pushes the point that they're going to somehow use this funding for the MTA. So that's why Donald's comment about taking the funding you receive from this and giving out people free passes to take those MTA buses, but purchasing the passes from the MTA makes sense because the funding goes to the MTA, but the fruit are actually going to stay with the state to live there. So that was his concept. So, Zhan, do you have a comment on that?
So I totally agree with Don. I do want to comment on one particular statement we often hear, right, in the parking debate, which is, charging parking is politically unpopular. I think that's the belief by many people, the politicians, the general public. But I actually wanted to question that statement. I think in the big metropolitan area like New York City, I think parking may not be the third rail, right? Touch you die. And I actually did, think about how many people, right, do not have cars, and how many people actually have off-street parking, right? Off-street parking. They do have their garage or driveway, so you don't need to compete with your neighbor for the street parking, right? And I think there is a space, right? There is a potential constituency to support, to charge on-street parking in a residential neighborhood. I actually did a survey several years ago for random like New Yorkers in Brooklyn and in Queens. So I asked them specifically, one, do you want to actually pay, right, for street parking to get a better chance, right, to secure a parking spot, right? But not guaranteed. Have a better chance to get a parking spot, but not guaranteed, right? And also, secondly, I didn't mention, right, the money paid will be actually spent in the neighborhood, right? Didn't mention the parking benefit district idea. So guess what? So 52% of people said, oh, I'm willing to pay, right? I'm willing to pay in order to have a better chance. And also, I asked them, using a very complex willingness to pay mechanism at the end. So the average value people are willing to pay is around $400 per year.
Yes, well, I would, John, and certainly I always quote that article, and many of your other articles, but I'm not talking about getting people willing to pay for parking. I'm getting people willing to charge for parking.
Right.
Interview people who own cars, they don't want to pay for parking, but if there are many more people who don't own cars than who do, it's a way to activate them politically, to say that if we charge for what is our common space, we charge market prices, we will get something. So I think it's motivating the people who do not own cars. And there's so many of those people in New York City. And now they don't have any incentive to go to a public meeting and complain about the fact that we don't charge for parking. But if they knew they were going to get free Wi-Fi or free transit, they would go to public meetings and they would say, we ought to charge for parking. And in these cities that start having parking benefit districts, when as soon as one area gets it, other areas want the same thing. They can see how it works. Say Pasadena in California is one of the first one. And people have the same arguments you hear, oh, this will chase away the few customers we have. But when they put in parking meters and spent all of the money, they didn't pay for public transit, they paid for rebuilding the sidewalks and cleaning the alleys and everything like that. The sales tax revenue, which is a measure of business activity, it tripled in the next 5 years. Well, why is that? Well, because the places are so much nicer to come to, that the city did what only the city can do, is to provide public infrastructure. And they clean the sidewalks every night. They pressure wash them twice a month. The area is immaculate. New York is, you can't go anywhere without seeing these black polka dots on the sidewalks. See, in a parking benefit district, you would never see that. That if they spend the money to pay for public services on the block that has meters, then one of the first things to do is to clean up the sidewalks.
You're speaking about meters, of course. So to be clear, because we have a question here from Inga saying, will you get an assigned parking spot for this permit? I want to make clear to people that we're talking about different things. When you say metered, you're not talking about parking permits then. You're talking about people. Metered parking people pay.
Yes, you wouldn't have permits on the Upper West Side. Because the hourly prices are so much higher. businesses will get so much more courses.
Donald, I think though it's this association, the people listening to it are primarily from Queens here. This is a Western Queens association, so I think they'd be very interested. Here, the permits would make more sense, I'm assuming, because you have a bigger percentage of people here with automobiles. It's a little bit less dense, and people that are on this call here that are listening are probably would be like to hear how that program would work. Zhan or Donald, do you?
Yeah, I would say no parking permit program in the country actually will give you an assigned space, right?
Yeah.
So it's normally worked out like within a district, right? So they will survey how many parking space on the streets, and then they may design a ratio, right? To design how many parking permits, the maximum, right? It could be issued. So with that ratio is likely, right? People can get a parking space, but there is no guaranteed, right? No guaranteed.
So
So that ratio also varies from from time to time, and also depends on how many parking permits you can get. Many people actually limits one household, 1 million address, one parking permits, and also maybe, right? Maybe this could be conditional on whether you have a garage or driveway or not, right? And maybe that's the variation. If you already have a driveway, maybe you are not qualified for the parking permits. There are some cities, right, with this policy requirement, but not many, right? Not many. So many cities do not differentiate people, whether they have a parking garage or have a driveway, or you only have street parking available for you. So it depends on the specific design, but in general, it doesn't guarantee a parking space on the street.
I know when I go to like Miami or other areas that have these kinds of areas, there's signage up there that says, a certain area or permit number or whatever is required to park in that area after a certain time. This is not 24 hours. It's generally starting when 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock on. And then you go and you can park in that spot if in fact you have that permit number or something. One of many spots, they're all in the same area. So it's sort of a district that you could park in. It's not a specific spot.
Right.
And I don't know, should they probably not issue any more permits and they actually have spots? Because they're still getting a permit. They have a permit number. So what do you think about that? How should they define that? In other words, if there's 100 spots, should they only put out 100 permits?
Yeah, I think that should be the mechanism, right? Depending on how many parking space and also how many registered vehicles, right, in the neighborhood or within the districts. Then you can design how many parking permits you wanted to issue. And also that the permits may vary by how many garage, right, parking lots, and also driveway available, right, in the neighborhood.
And the other thing is, the next question she says is, but how can they charge you for a spot that's not guaranteed? So I think they should not issue any more permits than there are spots available. And the only problem you're going to run into then, and this is an enforcement issue, is if somebody's parked during the day and they overstay their welcome. And you come there and a car that's without a permit is still there, they need to be tagged. They need to be ticketed. So I think that's very, very important. That's the one thing we didn't discuss so far is enforcement. Without enforcement, any of these programs are useless, I think. So.
Right. Why it matters? Because it's actually only allow the residents to park on streets. So if the neighborhood has many what we call the intrusion, right? Intrusion parking.
Yeah.
The park the car, registered in New Jersey, Connecticut, in many other places, right? The whole world can actually park on New York streets. So with the parking permits, that cannot happen, right? That cannot happen. So, I think why we have the conversation is because people are feared, right? Given the congestion pricing, many people will come to the neighborhoods, park their car on the streets, and just take the train to Manhattan. I think that's probably, the background of the conversation, right?
It is, yes. Good.
it's a real consideration. It's a real concern, I would say.
Good. Okay, it's almost 8 o'clock now. What I'd like to do is if you could give a final statement, Donald and Zhan, okay? And then also I'd like to tell everybody that if they go in chat, you'll see in there's an upload of the Donald Shroup parking benefit, his op-ed, and then also his research study. And there's also a copy of the OANA's position on residential parking permits. If you have a chance to read those and you have any questions, please email us. Please let us know. So this is a process. It's going to take a long time. We may not even see congestion pricing for another year, or even longer, and that's, I think, going to be the defining factor. So I think that it's important to start the conversation now. That's why this bill helps a lot and why we're in such support of it. It takes the responsibility away from the state, so we don't have to go through that bureaucratic hurdle. So when the issue comes up, we can deal with it in the timely fashion with our local council people and the mayor's office. So that's our feeling. Donald?
Well, I like the senator's bill. I think that he said that it should be up to New York to do what it wants to do. And I think each neighborhood should be empowered to do what it wants to do. If they want permits that are specific to a particular house, they should be able to get that. But in dense neighborhoods where there are many more people than curb spaces, you need something different. And I think the city ought to offer each neighborhood the option to sign a petition to say, I want to have market parking on my block, and I want it to pay for free transit passes for everybody who lives on the block. And then that you would just see, is there anybody who takes that? I don't see why anybody would say you should not offer a neighborhood this option. We don't want to make this possible for any block to say, yes, we want to charge fair market prices for the curb parking, and we want the money to be spent for free transit passes. It benefits so many people, other than the people on the block, because if they get free transit passes, there'll be less driving. There'll be less cruising for parking. There'll be more transit riders. And I think that there will be a cascade of benefits that will occur from this. And other low density neighborhoods, the conventional parking permit district is probably just fine.
Thank you. Great. Okay. And Zhan?
Yeah, I wanted to say, for policymakers, politicians, the parking is scary, right? Parking is just scary. They don't want to touch it. But I totally agree with Don. And if you design the parking policy carefully, right, charging parking could become a popular, right, and well-supported initiative by many different constituencies, right? The public transit user, the people without cars, and also the car owners, right, the car users who are willing to actually, pay to shorten their cruising at a certain time. So put all these people together, you may have a majority, right? I think we wanted to think about the parking, charging parking more carefully. Is actually not that scary. It could be a pretty popular and feasible policy. That's what I wanted to say.
Good. Well, thank you. This has been a long-standing issue in this city. As you said, every major city in North America, I think, has these, except us. And I'm looking forward to the time when we realize that if Chicago can do it, if Miami can do it, if Washington can do it, we can do it. I don't think any New Yorker should accept the fact that they can do something we can't. So with that, I'd like to thank Donald Shroup from UCLA, Zhan Goa from NYU. I'd like to also thank the Senator Gianaris, for joining us earlier. I'd also like to thank Hillary Bosch from the Department of Sanitation discussing composting, Luisa Benedetto and Zia Dawood from the Queens Library System, and from DDC, Anthony Romeo and Anna Killion on discussions about the renovations of the Astoria Library branch. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. I'd like to also reiterate on the 18th of this month, we are having the local neighborhood cleanup. We're looking for volunteers to help us out. It's great weather out. It's a great day to walk around the neighborhood, clean it up a little bit. And we're going to be meeting at the landing of the Astoria Ferry. This event is co-sponsored by the New York City Ferry System. So with that, we look forward to seeing everybody next month, the second Wednesday of the month. Looking on your social media and emails to get the presenters for that time. And everybody, I hope they're having wonderful holidays. Ramadan Mubarak, happy Easter, both Easters. Mine is coming this Sunday, and also Passover. So it's a wonderful time of year, and and the weather's beautiful. Spring came today. With that, I'd like to also thank Talisha Lee of Inside Track PR for hosting this program. She's done a great job. We greatly appreciate it. And I'd also like to thank our board member, Bishop Mitchell Taylor, for helping facilitate Talisha joining us. And we look forward to seeing everybody again soon. Thank you so much.